Good morning, colleagues. Thank you, and a warm welcome to all of you to the PERCO SA Ponder virtual presentation series. We will commence with a short presentation lasting about 30 minutes, a question and answer session of 10 minutes, and conclude with a lucky prize draw. You are welcome to field questions in the chat box during the presentation, which will be answered at the end of the presentation. This morning, Sacha Matulovich will enlighten us on a trendy and very interesting topic, the 3 laws of creating frictionless business experiences. In this Ponder presentation, Sacha will take us through the 3 laws of frictioneering and provide a new lens with which to look at the ways we can enhance our businesses and our relationships by creating frictionless experiences. Sacha is an entrepreneur and has launched 6 successful companies over the past 15 years. He co-founded technology startup St. Mark in 2018 and is its Chief Strategy Officer. Thank you, Sacha, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Ayubelela. And good morning and welcome to everyone who's joined the Ponder session this morning. I'm going to quickly share my screen with you here so that we can look at an idea that I'm really excited to share with you this morning. Thanks to PERCO for having me here. I'm really excited to share an idea with you today, and this idea comes in 2 parts. The first part is like a lens, and when we look through this lens, we start to see a higher purpose for us as technologists, and for the rest of us, we start to understand a little bit about some of the behavior shifts that we see, whether it's with customers, students, colleagues, or just the economy in general. The second part of this idea is a set of tools, and it's here that we'll get a bit more practical. It's my goal that we leave here with a few ideas and frameworks that we can take back to the office or to our lives that can help us to better understand some of the shifts we're seeing in behavior and how to apply our minds to them. Shifts like, for example, why 70% of people prefer texting to speaking on the phone, or why millennials are one of the most difficult target markets in the world to service, or why Uber disrupted the taxi industry and why disruptions like that will surely happen again. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, I'd like to just take you back to a moment in my life that set me on this course. And like any good disaster story, it begins in a boiling hot server room on a cold winter's day. And certainly if you're in technology, you'll know what I mean. So it was 2011, and we were busy building a virtual car dealership, the largest of its kind in South Africa. This is before the days of Wheelie and we buy cars and all of that. And as entrepreneurs, we all about solving problems. And the problem we're solving in this business was allowing people who are selling cars privately and buyers to do the deal and still be funded by the bank. So while we were solving this problem for buyers and sellers and banks, we had problems of our own. And on this particular day, I was standing in my boiling hot server room with my PBX technician, who is trying to explain to me why I need to spend another 50,000 Rand on even more kit. Now, every time our business changed its workflows or grew or had to change the way that it worked, I was being forced to invest in even more hardware. And this particular day, my PBX technician is trying to explain to me why a very simple feature that I believed was already built into my top-of-the-range PBX is not available, and actually I need to add more hardware. And for those of you who've procured and used PBXs, I think you'll probably be nodding your head at this moment. And it was at that stage I looked around the server room and I saw all the hardware lying all over the place, and I had computers tapping the lines to make call recordings. I had VoIP gateways, taking the calls out over the internet. I had a MAN 3000 beeping in the corner for no apparent reason. And I distinctly remember saying to myself, I can't work like this. I want to run my business like I run the rest of my life, from a laptop and in the cloud. This is absolutely crazy. And I went looking for answers. And the answer came to me in the form of a cloud-based PBX called Telviva. Now, the problem that this solution solved for me was so significant that I ended up investing in the business. And this is how I began my journey into the world of technology in 2011. But why am I telling you this story? What has a cloud PBX and Uber and millennials and people wanting to text over phoning, what have they got to do with each other, all of these stories? And it's this. For me, there's one central theme to all of these stories and ideas, and it is the idea of friction and our insatiable desire for frictionless experiences. So I believe that friction and the quest for frictionless is such a powerful force that it is shaping the world economy today as we speak. Now, coming back to the lens, I believe that as technologists, our higher purpose should be to remove unwanted friction for other humans, and we'll explore that in a bit more detail. I'd also like to get to the part around tools. So today, as we go through some of the content, I want to leave you with a language that will support the conversations that you can have in your own context around friction and creating frictionless experiences. I want to leave you with a framework that you can use for debate, for planning, and for being able to visualize friction and how to remove it from your own experiences. And lastly, I'll leave you with a set of laws that we can use to test and generate ideas. A quick disclaimer before we get into the content. When I started writing the frictionless frameworks, it was 2018, and we had no idea that in 2020, the world would be turned upside down. And, you know, prior to the pandemic, the world was moving in a pretty straightforward direction where consumers and people and economies were moving away from friction towards more frictionless experiences. But suddenly in 2020, we had the reverse of that, where an incredible amount of friction was suddenly added back to the system. And that was because of fear, the desire for safety. And we'll also cover this and kind of substantiate this in the laws in terms of how friction sometimes gets added back to a system in the case of fear, and sometimes necessary in order to create control and safety. So it really forced me to kind of stack up the laws against this new environment and see if the theory still held. So I look forward to sharing that with you today. Now, before we get going, I'm going to give you a quick brain teaser here and ask you to participate for 1 minute. This is a really simple puzzle that will only take you a few seconds to solve. Here we go. Right, so combined, the price of a bat and a ball is $1.10. Sorry, it can't be in rands, but you can't buy anything for R1.10. So a bat and a ball together cost $1.10. If the bat is $1 more than the ball, how much is the ball? 3, 2, 1. Your time is up. Congratulations. If you guessed the ball is 10 cents and the bat is $1, then you join me and half of MIT and Harvard students who got this one wrong. Of course, the price of the bat is $1.05 and the ball is 5 cents. But what's more interesting is asking, why do you and I and half of some of the smartest students in the world get this one wrong? And the answer and this example can be found in a book by Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman called Thinking Fast and Slow, where Kahneman explains to us that one of the mind's main characteristics is laziness, a reluctance to invest more effort than is strictly necessary. Meaning that when the mind is given an easy answer, it will grab it. This brings us to the first law of frictioneering, which is the law of the lazy mind. And this law says that thinking requires a lot of energy. When faced with a challenge, the mind has evolved to automatically seek the lowest friction option. So in this instance, 10 cents was available, it seemed right, and we just grabbed it because it was the easiest way and the most efficient use of mental energy. But what does this mean for all of us here today? Well, for example, if we've got to be highly aware of any forms of friction or obstacles that we put in the way of our customers or our students or our clients or our colleagues who are trying to deal with us. And I'm going to ask your permission that through this talk, I'll use the word customer or client, and it will apply to anyone who you are servicing in your ecosystem. So the minute that we add some kind of cognitive challenge, we are going to demand cognitive energy to be used by those that we are interacting with. And if presented with an easier option, the lazy mind will take that option, which explains why 70% of people prefer texting to speaking on the phone. And if we now contextualize this better, knowing what we know about the first law, it's more accurate to actually say that in 90% of cases, 80% of people find that texting is the lower friction option to speaking on the phone, which helps us to understand it better and be able to predict behaviors in the future. However, we've just gone through this time of incredible upheaval, massive fear, and a huge desire for security and safety. And we've actually seen the world move in this opposite direction, as I mentioned earlier, adding back huge amounts of friction to the system to get control and a sense of safety. But once that trust and safety returns, it is my belief that we will return to behaviors that present the lowest friction option. So when asked about what do you think the new normal will look like, it's my personal belief that we will move into the new normal and carry with us a mixture of behaviors, both pre-COVID and newly learned, but they will be selected for the lowest friction. So I challenge you to consider that. And it could be even the lowest social friction. It could be the lowest physical friction, and certainly it will be the lowest cognitive friction. Because our old normal was normal because it was the lowest friction option in the first place. And so that is how we will move forward into the future. This takes me to the second law of frictioneering, and I'm going to have a quick sip of water here so that I can do my best. And this law is the law of visible and invisible friction. So the second law states that friction starts out as invisible and is tolerated unconsciously by the market. But at the moment that the invisible friction is discovered, it becomes real. Now, to explain this better and to discuss this, I'm going to introduce this framework called the Friction Quadrant. We use this tool to map friction and also see what impact it's having on the system and the life cycle of our various products or workflows or customer experiences. So on the one side, the left-hand side, you've got the state of friction. On the right-hand side, a state of frictionless. Above the line, you've got that which is visible, and below the line, you have that which is invisible. Now, all friction begins, as the law tells us, in the bottom left-hand quadrant, quadrant 1, as invisible friction. And soon it is then discovered by the market and the audience, and it becomes visible friction, and therefore it becomes real. So something that we didn't even realize was a problem, suddenly we all wake up one morning and we decide this is a real problem. And this is where you get customer dissatisfaction, customer complaints, customer churn, client churn, student churn, and all the aggravation begins in quadrant 2. Then if we do our jobs as frictioneers and as entrepreneurs and as workflow designers, we work on that friction, we frictioneer, and we move the scenario into the third quadrant, which is a frictionless state, a visible frictionless state. This is where our customers and clients now have this visibly pleasant experience of a frictionless experience. We get customer recommendation, we get customer joy, delight, etc. in quadrant 3. But all too soon, our markets, our customers, our clients normalize this new experience, and it falls below the line back into the invisible territory, into invisible frictionless experiences, and it becomes expected, which is always the case with millennials. And I will now share with you just a quick story which I think illustrates this point.
I was on an airplane and there was internet, high-speed internet on the airplane. That's the newest thing that I know exists. And I'm sitting on the plane and they go, open up your laptop, you can go on the internet. And it's fast and I'm watching YouTube clips. I'm in an airplane. And then it breaks down and they apologize, the internet's not working. The guy next to me goes, this is bull. Like how quickly the world owes him something. Yes. He knew. Existed only 10 seconds ago. Right. I was on an airplane and there was.
Sorry for that interruption. I hope you can still see my screen. And I hope you heard the story about the internet on the plane. I think that the reason that is so funny is because it's so true. What happens is, suddenly this experience of this frictionless, visible frictionless experience, which is so wonderful, becomes expected, and the market normalizes it. And from there, we have to go through the same process again. Which brings us to the law of commercial fluidity. The law of commercial fluidity states that the volume and velocity of spend will be inversely proportional to the relative friction presented by a channel when compared with alternatives. Okay, so this is about disruption, because disruption is a commercial event where the normal suddenly is disrupted by a new frictionless option. And suddenly there's this massive rush of commerce down the channel that presents less friction. Okay. So in this law, it states that if significant friction is removed or added very quickly, you can experience disruption. And we're going to explore that for a few minutes. And this is probably the thing that most companies and brands and organizations and ecosystems are concerned about. Where is my disruptor coming from? So a great pre-COVID example is how Uber disrupted the taxi industry. So we start off in quadrant number one, where we've got this invisible friction. We all ride in taxis and it's really no problem. And slowly but surely, we realize that there is a better way. And as Uber presents itself, suddenly the delta between the existing solution and the new solution opens up really, really wide. And you have this massive rush of commerce down the frictionless channel. And now it's all about the delta. So it's about either a new solution removes a lot of friction, or an old solution suddenly adds a lot of friction. So whichever is the case, it's all about the delta in friction. And it's easiest to explain this through a different example. Let's say the work from home versus the corporate office environment. Now, up until COVID-19 occurred, we had all the tools. We had fiber to the home, we had Zoom, we had Teams, we had all the tools that we needed to work from home or to work remotely. But we didn't have the incentive of an incredibly wide delta of friction. The minute that huge amount of friction was added to the corporate workspace, it became very attractive for consumers and workers to rather work from home. And now what you've got is corporate real estate struggling to hold onto their cash flows as that cash rushes into work from home solutions. So there's a real cost to friction and frictioneering. It starts off as a risk when you've got an invisible friction, and I challenge you to go and explore and work hard to find if you have invisible frictions that are sitting below the surface, are being tolerated by your system at this stage. It presents a potential risk. It's not real yet, but it's sitting there waiting to happen. It then rises above the surface into the visible quadrant, and suddenly you have disruption, dissatisfaction, etc. Now there's a real cost, and the cost comes in the context of customer churn and dissatisfaction and so forth. Okay. Then you have the option to frictioneer and work and remove those frictions for your customers, consumers, and clients. But there's a cost that comes with frictioneering too. And this is where we're going to be weighing up the cost of removing the friction versus the cost of leaving the friction in place and dealing with the churn and disruption. And that's a really sobering moment for teams. But if we can get the frictioneering right, we can move the experience into the frictionless quadrant, delight consumers and customers. It will eventually fall to below the surface, and we will start to get real returns. This is where the flywheel, as they say, starts to happen, the return on fluidity. So in the last quadrant, when we talk about the return on fluidity, it's not just about capital. It's also about the impact that we can have on the positive experiences in people's lives. And I want to explore that quickly in this last law that I'm going to share with you, which is the law of good friction, because friction is not always a bad thing. So the fourth law states that friction is a force that should be applied in specific areas when needed. So there are just some events in life that require lots of friction. So if we look at the differences, the more friction you apply it makes you safer, gives you more control. The minute you want more choice, more features, you are in a higher friction environment, and it brings the experience into your present mind, into your consciousness, and makes that experience very real and in front of you. Whereas in the frictionless zone, things move faster, there's fluidity, decisions are made for us, and the whole experience falls into the background in our unconsciousness. Now, in many experiences in life, whether it be admin or retail or banking, we want things to move faster, be more fluid, kind of fall into the background and not require lots of burning of mental energy. But in other instances, we need to have the full experience and burn lots of cognitive energy to have that experience. And nothing could be truer than, for me, the experience of parenting. So parenting, certainly for me, is an experience that is both enjoyable and at times painful, but requires a lot of cognitive strain and concentration and focus. So, I think that with activities like learning or exercise or parenting, we are going to apply lots of our mental energy to those, and we should do that, rightly so. And that is why we need to make work and admin and retail and some of the other experiences in life more frictionless, because we only have a finite amount of mental energy every day. And I'm sure all of you would agree with that. At the end of the day, you've only got so much body battery left. And that's why we need to help our customers, consumers, students, and other people we work with to conserve their mental energy for things that are most important in their lives. Now, today I'm building a cybersecurity business called Sendmark, where our purpose is to make the internet a safer place so you can trust email again. Now, trust is a pretty interesting concept, and it has a lot to do with friction. And to explain that, I'm going to just tell you quickly about an incredible experience I had about a month ago, where I got the opportunity to ride in this car, which is called a CR6, which is designed to race in the Dakar with a completely crazy pilot driver named Brian. Brian Baragwanath is his nickname. Now, Brian and I went driving around in this car at speeds that were completely unfathomable to me. And that is a great illustration for me of the role that friction has to play, because without the access to friction, we have no way to trust the vehicle. Now, a vehicle like this costs about €500,000 to build. So let's call it, 8 million Rand. This is an 8 million Rand car. And the reason they put so much effort and technology into this car is so that you can stop this car when you need to stop this car. And if you know you can stop this car, in other words, you can add enough friction, you've got enough control, then it means you can go really, really fast and you can trust this vehicle. So friction gives us control, control gives us trust, and trust allows us to go really, really fast. So it's about applying friction at the right times for the right people. Now, in our cybersecurity business at Senmark, it's a very interesting space. Right now, a cyber attacker, it's way too easy for a cyber attacker to impersonate email, which is the problem that we specifically solve. So a cyber attacker can go out there and send an email from just about anyone in the world and pretend to be that person. Nothing stopping them, no friction at all. And the friction then falls to the security team and to the email users who are all the time trying to work out, am I being phished? What do I do to stop this problem, etc. Now, of course, at Senmark, our job is to make it, to add much more friction. In fact, to make it impossible for attackers to send email impersonations and make it much easier for security teams to manage and administrate their environments and much easier for email users to trust email. I'm going to give you the opportunity right now to test your own domain to see if you have this problem. So there's a little QR code. I'm going to leave it up on the screen for a minute or so. And if you scan that, it's going to take you to a little testing tool. You'll type in your email address and it will give you a score out of 5. Hopefully you're going to find this a frictionless experience. If you score a 5 out of 5 or a 4 out of 5, it means you are creating a lot of friction for cyber attackers, which is great. And you're creating frictionless experiences for your security team. If you score a 3 out of 5 or lower, it means that the friction is falling to your security team. So I'll leave that up on screen. And as I mentioned, when it comes to email impersonation, if you're a 3 or less, you are making the life of your attacker much easier, the life of your security team and your email users much more difficult. But on the other hand, if you're scoring a 4 or better, you are doing the reverse. So I'll give you the opportunity to do that by scanning that QR code. And you can find out what kind of friction you're adding in the right and the wrong places. And I'll just finish off by, just kind of making the illustration that our job for all of us, whether we're in technology or we're in control of any work systems or ecosystems, is to deal with all the controls below the surface so that we can present a smooth and frictionless experience to those that are working with us. And it gives me a lot of joy to feel that that is the lens that I'm looking through when I'm dealing with technology. So I hope you found this useful. I hope that I've left you with a couple of tools here, a language, words like friction, frictionless, frictioneering, superfluidity, so that you can have these conversations, because that's the first step, is to start having these conversations with leadership, with your teams, with your customers, and figuring out where the friction lies and how to remove it. I hope I've left you with a framework, the quadrant with the four areas and the way that friction moves through the system, from invisible to visible, to frictionless visibility, to invisible friction and normalization. And I hope that you will use that framework to kind of plot some of the things that you're experiencing. And lastly, I hope I've left you with a couple of laws that are useful to you. Those being the law of the lazy mind, which really explains behavior, the law of visible and invisible friction, which is really how we frictioneer. So we're going to hunt visible friction and we're going to frictioneer it. Find friction, frictioneer it the whole time, and keeping it above the line all the time. And that's our job as frictioneers. And I hope you will use that. The law of commercial fluidity, which helps us understand disruption and the delta that opens up, which then causes disruption to occur. And lastly, probably the most important, is the law of good friction, and why it's so important to preserve mental energy so we can spend it in the right places. Thank you very much for your time and for listening. And I will now take a couple of questions, or we can have some discussions. I'll leave it to the floor.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sacha. I'm logged in as Davy today, but my name is Jody. I'm one of Davy's colleagues. I'll just help get some questions to the floor. So Nick Hughes has asked, how do you go about discovering invisible friction? Is it a flash of inspiration, or are there techniques that can be used?
Yeah, so I like to ask, a couple of questions. So I don't think it's easy. Certainly, that's like kind of the golden, what do you call it? The holy grail, so to speak, is to find invisible friction. Because if you can do that, you can cause disruption, and that's a highly sought after event in commerce. So I think that one has to go and ask questions about firstly, where are things moving slowly in our system? What fears do we have? Because friction always follows fear. So, where we find that we're scared about something happening, we add more and more and more friction. So seeking out fear is probably the easiest way. So in an administrative context, we're worried that, customers aren't going to pay on time. So we add all of these credit controls, or we're worried that, people are going to steal our hardware. So we add all of these security control, so wherever there's fear, so I would hunt out fear and ask myself the question, what are we afraid of, and what frictions are we adding to control that fear? If that fear is not so important anymore, we can start to remove those frictions.
Sure, I hear you. And then here I've got another question here. Can you put the genie back in the box when friction becomes visible, but you can't fix it?
Look, if there's no fix, then the market has to tolerate it. I mean, they're going to moan about it. I'm speaking to you today from a friend of mine's house because I haven't had power since 5 p.m. yesterday afternoon. Now, what can I do about that? Well, not a hell of a lot. So you can't put the genie back in the bottle. And as soon as an option comes along that's lower friction, people are going to rush to it.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I was thinking while you were speaking was just about the entrepreneurial opportunities that are available in looking for solutions for the market. So even if you're not focused on your existing business, perhaps there's opportunities to look out there. I mean, like businesses, obviously, like you mentioned, Uber, Airbnb, Zoom, all of these big businesses that have made things incredibly easy for the new normal, but just in general. Great inventions have been launched off the back of people looking for solutions for markets and launching huge businesses off the back of them. So perhaps the opportunity is not just about frictioneering in your own business, but actually looking for opportunities for entrepreneurs. Have you got other examples of businesses that have done that?
Yeah, so I think that, look, if every entrepreneur really kind of asks himself the question, they'll find that there was something irritating them which caused them to start a business. Yeah. So in my case, I was the greatest enemy of the PBX, of the kind of the physical PBX in the world. So, at one stage I had the distributors of Samsung were, they were like, I was their arch enemy because I was here to destroy the typical PBX because I found it caused me so much friction. So I think, every entrepreneur finds something that irritates them and then they go and solve that problem. Yeah. And in saying that, they're basically finding a friction and they're trying to remove the friction. Yeah. One thing I do want to share, which I think is really interesting, because when we look at Airbnb and Uber and all of these, because technology obviously has a massive role to play in removing friction, is that you can leverage so many tools out there to remove friction. You don't have to be this like incredible software developer. One of the things that we don't know about Uber and Airbnb is that they actually integrate a lot of different tools together that already exist out there. So it doesn't, all of us out there that want to remove friction, there are a lot of tools. It's just that Uber integrated them. They were the first one to really integrate Google Maps and a whole bunch. There's about 7 different platforms that Uber uses that don't even belong to them. Yeah. Most of Airbnb doesn't belong to Airbnb. It's actually an integration. So it just gives us a lot of encouragement that we can go out and create new business.
Yeah, exactly. Someone's commented here, systems often have friction built in for historical reasons that may not be relevant anymore. That's an interesting comment and probably very true.
And again, that's the old fear that existed, and it's kind of now just become, this is how we do it. This is how we do credit vetting. We've always done it this way. We'll always do it this way. And it's like, but when was the last time someone defaulted? When was the last time that someone didn't pay us? Is this really a risk to add this 5-page credit application? Is it really necessary?
Yeah, make sure that you update. Yeah, I hear you. And Karen here said, what about when the friction is locked into the design of the technology you are using? Bit of a challenge.
Yeah, look, I mean, again, technology is going to evolve to offer a frictionless option because the reward is big in terms of profits. If you look at a sad one for me is, for example, the GoPro camera. GoPro presented this incredible product, but to get your footage off GoPro is so much friction. There's just no way that I'm going to use it over using my smartphone where I can instantly save and share and all that type of stuff. So I think GoPro, been in a lot of trouble recently and struggling, but hopefully we'll make it. And the same goes for digital cameras. I think that when the friction is built into a technology, it's only a matter of time before it gets removed.
Well, one of the things that I was thinking actually again while you were presenting is just that you were talking about security being put in place, obviously stopping cyber attacks. And I mean, it's one of the biggest problems we have in the marketing space is obviously getting our message to an audience that actually wants our message. And we're experiencing the friction in the other direction because we are being blocked obviously by spam filters and all these things because we're trying to market to an audience. So we're actually, coming into sort of loggerheads with people being, blocking us basically, even though our email is wanted and is relevant to those organizations. So those are things that we're sort of trying to address at the moment. It's interesting, these systems that you've got to try and get around.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, friction stops the good people and the bad people, and that's the problem with it, right? So, I mean, one of the things we do in email security is to make sure that the good messages go through and don't be blocked by the spam filters, because that, as you say, that's a huge problem. And security is the worst type of friction for good people. When you're standing at passport control or you have to go through a whole processing or whatever it is, just to prove that you're just a normal person. Or my favorite is when I go to visit my brother-in-law who lives in a very big gated estate, and I have to kind of give them a blood sample before they'll let me in. And I'm saying, guys, I'm just a normal human being. So I hear that.
Exactly. I see that someone here has just asked if you wouldn't mind sharing that QR code again. They obviously missed it, so that would be great. And then I'm not seeing any other questions here. So if nobody else has anything else they want to ask, I think we can wrap up, and I'll hand over to Aya to thank you officially. But I've really enjoyed this session. Thank you so much.